should be bigger. A 3-year study into all the options has recommended a new third runway at Heathrow.
We believe we've got reasonable solutions that won't please everybody, but which set a new balance between the needs of the economy as a whole and the interests of local communities.
What he means is he wants Heathrow to be a better neighbour to those living nearby. That would mean no more flights before 6 o'clock in the morning. It would mean an absolute guarantee there will never be a fourth runway at Heathrow. It would mean legal limits on the amount of noise and on local air pollution as well. And it would mean airlines having to help fund things like double glazing to keep that noise out, although that could put money on the price of a ticket. So first blood goes to Heathrow, but that fight was child's play compared to the next, convincing politicians it's the right idea. But if you look at the politics, this runway is still undeliverable, isn't it? You've even got a Prime Minister who came out against it 5 years ago.
Well, the Prime Minister showed great political leadership in setting up the Airports Commission with cross-party support 3 years ago. We have changed our plans completely to meet his needs. We have U-turned so that the Prime Minister doesn't have to.
In the end, it's come down to money. Heathrow would make more for Britain than Gatwick. The report says that an extra runway in West London would add £147 billion to the economy over 60 years. It would generate 70,000 new jobs, and it would add 40 new destinations, although only a dozen of those would be long haul. But Gatwick isn't finished yet. Although the report says the economic benefits would be considerably smaller, it says it's still feasible, giving the government a get-out if it can't agree on Heathrow.
Gatwick Airport is still very much in this race, and as we look forward, we see that the next important milestone is the government decision. Ultimately, it's the government that will decide which of the airports gets the additional runway, and because we've got the strongest case, we're the fastest to deliver, we're the cleanest and the quietest, we still remain of the view that the government, when it decides later on this year, they'll back Gatwick.
For all the business benefit, ordinary people would still lose their homes. A big chunk of the village of Harmondsworth would be wiped off the map.
It would be an act of barbarism of unparalleled proportions in peacetime.
It's also going to destroy a lot of lives, an awful lot of lives. I mean, these people are 60, 50, 60, some of them, and they're never going to get work again if they move on. Where do they move to?
So the recommendation's in. Now it's over to the politicians. Richard Westcott, BBC News, Heathrow. As a plane lands behind me, the committee has now picked Heathrow, but this is by no means a done deal. We can expect plenty of rows in the months ahead. Rita.
Thanks very much, Richard. Well, opponents of a third runway say they won't give up the fight. And London's Mayor Boris Johnson, who's always opposed the plan, says he thinks it'll never be built. Here's our political correspondent, Robin Brandt.
There was a time when David Cameron was against a bigger Heathrow. No ifs, no buts, he said in 2009. A clear commitment. He delayed the final decision so the election could pass. But now he has to make his mind up. His big problem is the people leading the fight against it are Tories from his own side.
Is this a convention of NIMBYs, Boris?
No, says the Mayor of London. He insists this is about more than just building in his own backyard.
I just don't think that you can do this kind of thing in 21st century Western European society. Yes, maybe in some communist regime in the 1950s, but this is too environmentally damaging.
In a city with plenty of noise and pollution on the streets, his concern is a bigger Heathrow means a lot more of it in the skies above. Tory MP who wants to be the next mayor says he'll quit Parliament if Heathrow gets the go-ahead.
I made a pledge years ago that I would trigger a by-election if my party gives a green light to expansion. Obviously that pledge stands.
The Prime Minister has got problems at the heart of government as well. Here we are in Downing Street. Over here, the Foreign Office, where the man in charge, Philip Hammond, is an MP near Heathrow. He doesn't want it to get bigger. Next door, the Chancellor, George Osborne, he does support it. He thinks it's good for the economy. And in the middle, David Cameron, who's been against the idea of a third runway in the past. Is he about to change his mind?
Well, one thing is clear from Prime Minister's questions. He's not rushing into any final decision.
I'm very clear about the legal position that if we say anything now before studying the report, actually you could endanger whatever decision is made. But the guarantee I can give to the Honourable Lady is that a decision will be made by the end of the year.
That gives the Prime Minister more time and room for manoeuvre. For Labour, this is an issue of country over party.
Can I ask the Prime Minister, will he stand up for Britain's interests or will he just be bullied by Boris?
There was much talk of that long-term economic plan during the election. David Cameron needs to decide now if expanding Heathrow is part of that, knowing he'll have to fight some on his own side along the way. Robin Brandt, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, let's talk now to Norman Smith, our assistant political editor. And Norman, this report finally out, but it's politically fraught.
Well, Rita, it may be a scorchio day today, but if I was David Cameron, I think I'd don a tin helmet, because pretty much whatever he does, he faces a bruising backlash. If he gives the go-ahead to Heathrow, he faces a bust-up with some of the biggest beasts in his party. Boris Johnson, Zach Goldsmith, the man who would be Tory mayor of London. Some of the senior figures in his government, one of whom told me today that the Davis report was, and I quote, a steaming pile of beep. If, on the other hand, he gives the go-ahead to Gatwick, there are around 20 Tory MPs who are determined to stop him and are already saying that those cabinet ministers who are opposed to Heathrow on constituency grounds, they shouldn't be allowed to say, they should not be allowed to vote. On the other hand, if Mr Cameron goes for the third option of delay, of trying to boot this into the long grass, then he faces a ferocious row with business who are screaming out for a decision after more than 50 years of prevarication. Now, at the moment, Mr Cameron is circling over the Davis report. He's in a holding pattern over Heathrow. He says he won't say anything until December, but when he does finally decide to land, be it at Heathrow or Gatwick, he faces the most almighty political prang.
Thanks very much, Norman. Norman Smith there. And you can get more on the Airport Commission's decision to back a third runway at Heathrow on our website. That's at bbc.co.uk/news. Frantic efforts are being made to try to stop an exit by Greece from the euro. Greece has reported